Welcome, everybody. It's my great privilege. We're going to speak with John Schlafly. John Schlafly is in Alton, Illinois right now at the home of Eagle Trust. I'll tell you about that a little bit more, but the important thing to know is John Schlafly is Phyllis Schlafly, the late Phyllis Schlafly's oldest son. He himself is an attorney, graduated with honors from the University of Miami School of Law, then did a master's degree in LLM at Washington University in law, also I think in tax law. And for many decades, he was with Phyllis Schlafly. He serves in senior leadership positions in our Eagle Forum organizations, the Eagle Forum Educational Legal Defense Fund, Phyllis Schlafly Eagles. But I mentioned Eagle Trust. I've talked before, John, to our college students here. It's the 27th annual Collegians Summit. All these hundreds, thousands of students. One of the things that Phyllis Schlafly learned to do early in her life was be a writer. And when she passed away, she had an extraordinary trove of writing, books and essays and articles and commentaries that is all owned and held in her estate, that is a part of the future, and that's part of what Eagle Trust does. So welcome, John Schlafly. First of all, as the 27th annual Phyllis Schlafly Collegians Summit, why did Phyllis start doing collegians, John? What's your sense of why Phyllis Schlafly thought it was important and why we keep doing it now?
Well, Phyllis, throughout her career, wanted to enlist younger people in her movement, and she recruited young people. She invited the older people to bring their college-age sons and daughters to their meetings, and so the annual Eagle Forum Collegians just grew out of that effort.
Yeah, John, we were taking questions from our college students, and many of them that. Some of our alumni are on that have been here in the past in through our Collegian Summit. And one of the questions that we got is, why did Phyllis Schlafly, so famous, so revered as a conservative leader, you know, her book, which I've talked about to our college students on this Collegian Summit virtually, we talk about A Choice Not an Echo, written in 1964, which really launched the conservative movement in many ways. She's credited with having been one of the real important people for Ronald Reagan ascending 16 years later in 1980 to the presidency. How and why, one of our questions came from the college students, did Phyllis Schlafly pick Donald Trump?
I don't know how many of our listeners will remember when Donald Trump emerged on the national scene. Of course, he's been famous really for all of his life, for 30 years.
Right.
But the idea of running for president, he flirted with the idea in 2012 and then chose not to. And then people said, well, he would never run. He's just doing it from publicity. And then on June 14th, 2015, Mr. Trump and his wife, Melania, rode down the famous escalator and gave a bang-up, terrific speech that really set the nation on its ear, frankly. And It just grew from there. And Phyllis listened, and she said, "Why don't any other Republicans speak this way?"
Yeah. Well, and John, you mentioned Phyllis Schlafly, and I should say John and his brother Andy continue the weekly column that Phyllis wrote for decades and decades. John and Andy keep it going. Post over at townhall.com, and also as I've mentioned over and over, phyllisschlafly.com, our website has it archived there. But I think it was 2011, Phyllis actually wrote a column about Donald Trump speaking about China. He had been speaking about China for a couple of decades, actually, and then on immigration, on sort of American sovereignty. So, John, one of the through lines or threads for our collegians at this summit has been to answer two questions with speakers like you. And I know we've got some other topics to cover that you and I bounced around. But one is, for college students, what do you tell them at this moment? How do you encourage them? What do you think's at stake for our college students? And the second one is about the creeping, it's not creeping anymore in terms of education, but the creeping socialism and the acceptance of socialism as a positive thing. So first, John, what do you tell our college students about the future, where we are, encourage them? What's going to be the future for them?
Of course, the younger you are, the less of our history you know from your own experience. Today's college students, of course, do not remember the Cold War, don't remember when communism was a national issue that everyone understood was an enemy of our country. And you kind of have to learn that all over again, because I'm afraid it's not being taught in colleges unless you go to Hillsdale. But
there's a few others, but go ahead.
And a few others, yes, a few others.
John, you mentioned
Grove City, where Paul Kengor teaches.
Right.
And Paul Kengor wrote a book entitled The Communist,
Right.
which was about Barack Obama's mentor, who was a communist. But I'm not sure how many of our students even remember Obama that much, because even that has receded into the past. He's stepped off the stage. You noted he's still not really campaigning for Joe Biden. Isn't that interesting?
It is a good point, actually. It's funny that you mentioned that. He hasn't been out at all. Michelle Obama did an appearance recently, but not him. But John, one of your columns recently, you wrote about the 1776 commission that Donald Trump announced a few weeks ago, talking about education and how we need to get back to educating on sort of patriotic values. And I know you said it's just so important that he would say that, and what his speech said. In fact, I think you were quoted to me, it might have said to me, that one of the more important speeches he gave. Tell me about why that's so important to you.
Well, there's a movement in America to basically redefine what America is all about. And it's crystallized around something called the 1619 Project, which was created by the New York Times. But it's also much talked about during this past summer of rioting, which, some people even refer to it as the 1619 summer, and the idea that the 4th of July should be replaced by Juneteenth. So Donald Trump, fortunately, is having none of that, and he has set a commission to restore and reinstate American values of the founding of our country, including the great men who wrote the documents which define the country that we have. And that is our history, the both good and some bad, but mostly good, which we need to know and understand, because that's the country that we have. And there were compromises made when our country was formed, but if it weren't for those compromises, we wouldn't have had a country at all. So people need to understand that, and that used to be agreed by liberal and conservative alike. Ed, for the last generation, the foremost liberal writer on the Civil War and Lincoln and that period was a liberal Democrat, very well known, named James McPherson, who had a best-selling book, and he is on the side of Donald Trump on this matter, and against the 1619 Project, which he's called basically a pack of lies. So Trump is moving on that, and I hope we'll see more of that in the second term.
John, I take questions from our collegians. One of the questions from the collegians that they asked me to ask every speaker of a certain age, and you happen to be that certain age, and that is this. When you were a college student, you graduated college in or around 1972, if I'm doing my math right. Did you already know about these issues? Did you care about them? Were you already a conservative, or did it take you longer in your life to catch up to the importance of these issues?
Well, I guess I grew up as a conservative, but during that period, many conservatives, especially younger ones, were very dissatisfied with Republican politicians and elected officials. I mean, of course, Richard Nixon was president. Gerald Ford was the next president. We didn't like them. And we were looking for something, and eventually, a decade later, Reagan emerged on the scene. So when Reagan emerged, then I consolidated the conservatives along a broad spectrum, both young and old. Reagan appealed to young people even though he was the oldest president to date, he appealed much more to young people than did any earlier Republican. So that's kind of the perspective on that.
Okay. We're talking with John Schlafly, who plays senior leadership roles in the Phyllis Schlafly organizations, and also, I mentioned, writes a column every week and appears often on my radio show. John, one of the issues that President Trump ran and won on, which came through his administration, his first term, is a question of immigration and American sovereignty, if I can describe it that way. Can you talk about that? I know you've written about it a bunch, and the late Phyllis Schlafly did a lot. I mean, whether it's the preference for visas for immigrants from other nations that take jobs that Americans can do, the question of illegal immigrants. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are on the record saying we should give free health care to all illegal immigrants, which is 20 plus million people. That would be not only cost a lot, it would sort of shatter the Medicaid and Medicare systems. But that question, John, of immigration, the media tries to make it into, oh, you must be anti other people or all. But how important is that? How important that is for this moment and for the future?
It is a very important issue. Now, President Trump is not really talking about that so much
No, he's not.
this year, which is a little surprising because he has a good story to tell. He's accomplished a lot, so much so that the people who are promoting more immigration have complained bitterly about it because the numbers show that President Trump has managed, even without the support of Congress, to make substantial cuts in the amount of immigration that's coming into America. In fact, a recent editorial in the New York Times complained that he basically cut legal immigration in half from what it used to be before he became president. And he's cut the number of refugees that we accept by about 80 or 90%. Now, those are major changes. Now, I don't know, of course, when immigration has been a controversial subject, even among conservatives in some cases. And some people are a little sensitive because many of us are descended from immigrants and have sentimental feelings about our immigrant ancestors. But the fact is that the number of immigrants that have come into the United States for the last 25 years until Donald Trump has been way too high. And the public believes it's too high. And you take polls and you ask people what they think the right number of immigrants should be, it's much lower than we've been taking. And the majority of people want immigration reduced because America is changing too far and too fast due to people from other parts of the world who come here and don't share our values, many of them, and they congregate in their own ethnic communities, speaking their own language. They never assimilate, integrate, or become Americans. And they even get elected to Congress from their own insular ethnic communities. And of course, the poster child for that is Ilhan Omar. And,
Right.
You could say, use her as an example of when immigration is too high. When somebody like Ilhan Omar could come to this country and be protected by our country and then learn to hate America and be elected to Congress.
Yeah. John, we're talking with John Schlafly. Again, the Schlafly Report posts over at townhall.com and phyllisschlafly.com. It's archived there. John, one final question, which is a big one. You mentioned that a lot of our college age and even older in college age don't really remember the Cold War. If they do, they think to themselves, well, the Soviet Union, they lost, America won, and now we're where we are. When you think and talk about communist China, and the question of what the communist part of that is. It's not just a rival. This isn't a rival nation or a rival trading partner or a rival trading entity. It's a communist regime that has as its goal a managed economy where the powerful control the whole economy. Private rights, private ownership rights are diminished if non-existent. And yet a lot of the coverage is, well, China, we get cheap goods from there and maybe it's not such a big deal. What's your sense on the China question and what young people should know about that vis-a-vis what the system is? The American system is market capitalism with private property rights protection. The communist Chinese is government control and very, very different. It's not close. And I worry that our higher education, for example, teaches that these systems are, well, they're different, but they can work out if you just work them right.
Well, China is a one-party state, and the only allowable party is the Communist Party. Many of the major enterprises, companies, are state-owned enterprises, SEOs, and even the ones that are not fully state-owned are partly state-owned and state-controlled. And enterprises are designated to be so-called national champions, and the companies that are national champions get preferences under the Chinese system. So when American companies try to compete over there, they find they cannot do that unless they do the bidding of the people who run the show over there. And so this is not free enterprise. And my view is we should not allow China or the state-owned enterprises of China or the companies that China is promoting, like Huawei is a perfect example, to participate in the world trading system. They should be restricted. They should not be allowed on the U.S. stock exchange. They should not be allowed to, own property and basically compete in America as if they were just any other company, because they're not just any other company. They are organized in a way that no American can compete with them unless the Americans go to China and basically become Chinese, as in effect General Motors has done. So, it's a very serious thing and the Trump administration understands that. Peter Navarro in the White House understands it. He wrote a book and movie called Death by China before he went into the White House, and he has the right idea about how to deal with that emerging threat to our country.
All right, so let me ask you a question. I think I know the answer. Do you have a TikTok account, John Schlafly? All right, never mind. Now listen, John, that's what this is. This is anti-TikTok. You're like probably working for one of the American-owned social media giants. I know how this works. John, last question. 2 books, one book by Phyllis Schlafly and one other book that you recommend to our college students.
Well, The Conservative Case for Trump is certainly the book. Well, although it came out 4 years ago, it's still worth reading today because it tells, why, 4 years ago, the thrust of that book was to teach Phyllis's traditional audience why Trump is a conservative, because many conservatives then didn't understand that, and she explained why. So that was an important path-breaking landmark book, Ed, and you had a role in that yourself.
Yes. All right. The one non-Phyllis Schlafly book that you recommend.
Well, I might mention, Ed, there was a new book that came out just about a month or perhaps 6 weeks ago called Promises Made, Promises Kept.
Oh, very good.
And it's a very, very easy read. It's like one promise per page. You can memorize it, and you can get your talking points for the next 3 weeks.
All right. Very good. I like that, John. That was excellent. Very good. All right. Well, we'll get your TikTok account open and we'll give it to all the college students and you guys can start exchanging things. All right. John Schlafly, everybody, you can, again, every Tuesday evening, he posts his column, The Schlafly Report, with his brother, Andy. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Ed.
All right. We'll be right back. We got a lot more here on the 27th Annual Phyllis Schlafly Collegians Summit.